1914 hours. The quiet panel slid up and Amiya ran her fingers across the screen, sifting through the parts requisition database. Her fingers prodded and slid across holographic symbols with the quickness of a hungry hummingbird, thumbing down through a decision tree of categories. Central motor cortex, Edition D, build 3.27, 12-volt amplifier, credits, 37.50, limit 2 per customer. She tapped the purchase key with the tip of her index finger and the small centrifuge in the center of the printing module kicked up into a lightning-fast spin. The sound of the motor erupted in a crescendo until tiny filaments of light lurched from the 3 tips of the spinning centrifuge and connected to the base plate beneath it. Small blocks of metal materialized and slowly transformed into the basic structure of the build 3.27 central motor cortex Amiya needed to get Unigine mobile again. Ding! A notification from the parts printer cut into her thoughts with a piercing ring from its microspeaker. With a delicate grip, she picked up the warm metal and held it in her palms. A thin film of clear polymer covered the 4 symmetrical, yellow blocks. She pulled it up to her face and watched as the fresh, newly printed protective layer of thin plastic slowly evaporated. The thin stream of white vapor was so subtle it was almost impossible to see. Standing up with great care, she walked over to Unigine's incapacitated shell. His body sat atop a grease-stained burnt orange storage grate, leaning forward with his shoulders lurched and his head hanging low. He was more than just powered down, he was defeated. Holding his new central motor cortex in one hand, Amiya grabbed the handle of another storage crate nearby and pulled it up to his backside, before sitting down cross-legged behind him. "House, I need magnification." "Acknowledged," a synthetic voice responded from a speaker box in the ceiling. Amiya ran her fingers along the 3 holes that extended for about 7 inches from the right side of his chest down his sternum. A magnification window then rolled along a track in the ceiling, hanging from a mechanical arm, and slid in front of her face. "Thanks." "Of course, Officer Lin," the synthetic voice answered. The screen on her communications module flickered on as the orange light sitting atop its upper edge pulsed on and off. "Incoming transmission." "Accept," she uttered without looking up from her work. An image in shattered blue and black hues materialized on the screen. Amiya looked up and pieced together the view of a tall figure wearing a long, black coat. He was standing outside her front door, above which was a bright sign reading, District 43 First Response and Mech Android Repair. On top of this man's head was a small, black canvas hat with a small bill and a large violet star stitched loudly onto the front of it. Even in the low-resolution feed, she could make out the steady flow of raindrops sliding down the side of his cloak as he hunched over the small communications terminal. It was positioned way too low for him, all the way down by his hip on the side of the door. He pressed his stiff finger against the button and held it there, as the rain streamed down either side of it like a leaking faucet. "Hello?" Amiya called out. The man pulled his finger away from the button and the buzzing stopped, but he didn't say a word. Instead he remained still as he stared at the comms panel. "Yes? Can I help you?" A deep, raspy voice emerged from the speaker. "I'm looking for a Len, Amiya Lin. Is she here?" Amiya stood up from behind Unigine's damaged body and walked over to the control console on her desk. She flung her hand down against the talk button and spoke firmly. "I'm sorry, but the shop is closed. You'll have to come back during normal business hours or set up an appointment." The man pointed to the sign above his head. "It says you're open until 22. That's more of a recommendation." He turned around and noticed a pack of STEM junkies shouted wildly and falling over themselves in a dazed stupor across the street. They rumbled around beneath thin rusty panels of discarded steel, a makeshift shelter, shielded from the constant train by a massive concrete overpass, hanging 30 meters above their heads. "I don't have time for this," she heard him say. He opened his coat and pulled a card from his breast pocket. He brought the card down and pressed it against the glass sensor pad on the communications terminal. Across her screen the words "Cardinal Clearance" were scrawled. The man pressed on the talk button once again. You'll want to hear what I have to say. Well, I guess I have no choice, huh? Amiya opened the door and let the man in. He walked up the stairs and approached her door. She opened it. Welcome, she said, pulling a chair across the room, tripping over wanton cables and discarded mech-android parts. I wasn't expecting visitors. That's understandable, the man said as he took his coat off and hung it up on a rack next to the door. It was now obvious that he was wearing that to obscure what laid beneath, a clean, fully put together officer's uniform from the global defense conglomerate. It was covered in tiny rectangles colored in varying shades of black, gray, and violet. A prominent patch was sewn onto his shoulder, with the crimson-red circle of the Japanese flag stitched into it. His short sleeves revealed solid, bulging biceps and strong muscles all around. A thick and rectangular, well-trimmed mustache hugged his upper lip. Given what you went through the other day. He bent down and sat in the chair. Amiya took notice of the silver nameplate above his left breast pocket, which read Colonel Jin Oshiro. Listen, Mr. Oshiro, I'm sure you're somebody very important, but I've been through this 1,000 times already with the police. I did my best, but there was nothing I could do to stop those Santas. Just look, the man interrupted her as she pointed at Unijin's charred body. I didn't come here to ask you questions about that. Then why are you here? It's getting late and I really need to patch this guy up so I can get back to picking up jobs. Money's tight right now. With all due respect, your friend will just have to wait. Oshiro reached his hand into his breast pocket and pulled out an aluminum cylinder, the size of a pin, and brought it to his mouth. With his thumb and forefinger, he squeezed a small plastic sac on each side, pushing a few drops of oil into a chamber at the top of the cylinder. Ah, he said, leaning back into his chair. Hokkaido has the best stem oils in all of Japan. Well, the legal ones, anyone. I love to taste the local offerings every time I come here. After slipping his thumb onto a different button and pressing in, he drew a massive, vapor-filled cloud of air into his lungs. As his sleeve pulled up a little higher on his arm, Amiya noticed a tattoo, made of 3 small, parallel black lines. This is an allusion to the secret program that developed Jomai from infancy into a ruthless warrior. Ryan Jones, August 14, 2019, 4:46 p.m., on the outside of his left wrist. He then slowly put the cylinder onto the table, before letting the vapor-infused air out, spilling into the space between them. So, you may know who I am already. Amiya nodded. I've seen you in the news. That's right. You must be someone very important, then. The man leaned forward. Wrong. I'm not what's important, it's what I've come here to discuss with you that's important. Amiya sat firm in her chair. Well, I think you've got the wrong girl, then. All I'm doing now is trying to make my way through life in this wretched place. Listen, that man you tried to bring in, that Naruto Fujiwara, it's true that he wasn't much more than a low-life, garden-variety criminal. And we don't know exactly how G got mixed up with those Santas. But that satchel he was carrying, that's what really interests us. It has fallen into the wrong hands, and this, he puffed on his vaporizer, this is where you come in. You saw something you weren't supposed to see, but the fact that you saw it tells me everything I need to know. And I'm glad you did. Amiya scratched her jaw. She could tell there was a lot that this Oshiro man was not telling her. Look, I can't explain it here, but you could be really valuable for us. Oshiro took a drag from his vaporizer. We're running an experiment. Something new. Something innovative. And we're looking for outsiders to pull into this. We could use someone with your creativity. We've tried this with insiders, but they just can't seem to make it happen. Amiya sipped her tea. How did you manage create that mental bridge between you and, he looked at Unijin's broken body, your partner? It's easy, she said, pointing to the left side of her forehead. Speech is produced in this part of our brain. I just a Neuralink node, placed it inside my helmet right there and configured it to transfigure the firing of my neurons into speech on my comms terminal. The tricky part was training myself to think as if I'm going to speak, but then hold my tongue. That's the only way I can get the words to come across the system. If I just think, without the intention of speech, nothing goes through. I could just speak into a microphone, but where's the fun in that? Plus, it's quicker this way. Interesting, he said, rubbing his chin. I've come here with an offer for you. One that I think you're really going to like. The man pulled a small memory card out from his breast pocket and slid it across the table. We're launching a special unit, an elite group within the military, to provide security on Mars. I'm sure you're aware of the upcoming global defense games in New Sendai, and some of the troubles we've been having there. It's still 6 months out, and we think you could help calm all our nerves. It's a big event and we need things to go smoothly. I really don't know why you've come here. I've got nothing to do with the military. No interest, none. I like my life here. It may not be much, but I can manage. I can take care of myself, thank you. I had a feeling you'd resist. But I've looked into your profile and I've touched your shadows. We know everything, Amiya. Amiya gasped slightly. Who do you think you are? Spying on me? Pulling my history? Oshiro put his hand forward, gesturing for her to calm down. Listen closely, because this is what I've come here to tell you. Amiya nodded, no less flustered than before. We can get rid of your problems, Miss Lan. All of them. Come with us. Sign up for just this one, single campaign, and you won't have to run anymore. Oshiro tapped the memory card. When you're ready, take a look. The details are all in there. Amiya picked up the silver disc and held it in the palm of her hand. The man stood up, pulled his coat from the hanger and walked to the door. Before Al pulled his hand up to the door, he turned around and faced Amiya one more time. Just call me when you've made the right decision, he said, before walking out of the room. Amiya buried her head in her hands. Ugh, she blurted out. She picked a greasy wrench from atop the table and threw it at Unigen's powered-down body. We should have never taken that job.